Welcome to Building Belonging, a podcast of the New York City Bar Association and its Office for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. Opinions expressed are those of the speakers and not necessarily of the City Bar. We, as an office, have been talking about Wicked for months, since it came out. It's really become a cultural touchstone for us and for our work. And just sort of nerding out about how deeply DEI it is, how deeply rooted DEI themes are in that movie, which was the biggest movie of ever or something. Truly, it was definitely number one while it was out. I think it broke all sorts of records. And I think today we really just want to nerd out about how great Wicked is and really unpack a lot of what it models in terms of DEI work and DEI thinking. We've got a couple of people who are hardcore billion times rewatching Wicked fans, all the way down to somebody who just watched Wicked for the first time last night.
I'm ready for part 2.
So I read Wicked, the book, for January, the original January, when I turned 30 and I celebrated my birthday for 30 days. I did a book club and had people read Wicked with me. It was the first time I read it. Then I got to go see the musical on Broadway. I did watch Wicked in theaters. It was me and my husband. Just a great experience. We went to the Alamo. You guys know how I feel about Alamo. I talk about Alamo Drafthouse in our meetings. I love them. And then I watched it again when it was released with my kids in 2 parts. And some of what I want to talk about today is how much they picked up on the subtle cues of the movie. And I think it's so powerful because of that, because there's so many messages even in between the lines. So yeah, I guess I'm probably one of the super fans of the group.
I think for me, I didn't know anything about Wicked. I have actually never watched the Wizard of Oz original. I've watched the Muppets one. So that's where my knowledge comes.
And you're fully up to speed.
Yeah, and so I watched it in November when it came out, and I had no idea what the plot was. I was going in to be surprised, and it didn't disappoint. I love the songs. I love the dancing through life bit. It was, my dancer brain was, this is so amazing and great. So I love that part. I watched the first part of it, or I don't know, it was for 30 minutes in the treadmill while I was getting my cardio in, because I had to go and touch grass. So, and then I went to the gym. And then I was helping my mom with dinner, and I was watching it in the background, and it was really interesting because she picked up on she called it human rights. She said, "Oh, that's literally human rights." So it was really cool to see that in the background, the wheels were turning for everyone.
I love that opening scene. There's such a creepy, malicious kind of undertone to the celebration that this town is doing at somebody's death. And I think it really sets the tone of the movie. And it really sets the tone of the DEI themes, when there are a lot of undercurrents, a lot of quiet parts that aren't being said out loud. And also, I think a lot of, what this movie has to talk about, disinformation and sort of groupthink.
I think going back to that opening scene, that was my very first note. Going in, not knowing anything about what it was going to be. I was like, okay, they're celebrating that the witch is dead and now we're all free. Oh my God. But I was like, but I have Wicked Witch is dead, but systems of oppression don't exist in a vacuum. So where I was immediately on the defensive. I was like, I don't know what people see in this movie. I'm annoyed already. And then I had to sit there and watch it and be like, okay. But that was my very first thought, was how does this fit DEI? I was texting Angie as I was watching it. You believe
the beginning scene? First of all, I want to hear what Angie has to say about Ariana in the scene, because I know Angie has some really strong opinions about Ariana.
I have beef, but I won't bring my beef into this episode. I'm gonna.
I get your beef, and I also think it's valid, and I agree with so much of it. But can I just say, I freaking love her as Glinda. Yeah. She nailed it. She was born for this role. Every cute dimple, every twinkle. When she is dancing on the floor with that beautiful nightgown, girl, if I ever get that nightgown, there's no stopping me. There will be nothing I can't do.
That's the nightgown I wanted for my wedding day.
Girl, I want to wear it every day for the rest of my life. It's just such a great outfit. I mean, one of the reasons why I love the movie so much is because it's drag. This is drag, y'all. This is exactly what drag is. I thought Ariana's entrance was just so perfect. I think she nailed it. It does have that creepiness about it. And this is one of the things my kids did pick up on. So one of the things they said during the scene was, well, first, they were just like, why are they celebrating someone being dead? Like, that is crazy. Like, why are they celebrating someone dying? So they thought that was insane.
I like that you said the opening was creepy, Eli, because that's exactly how I felt. And there were so many, and you also said how there was a lot of silent parts that unless you're looking for it, you don't really pick up on it. So it's very subliminal. Like what I picked up on was all the poster boards and how they were like, and the drawing of it. And that just brought me back to other historical contexts where drawings it was all propaganda, and cartoon drawings really depicted a picture of certain people. Like, so that's where when I saw the wanted and all those signs, like that's where my mind went to. And so you can draw a very like close parallel. Going back to Ariana Grande, while I have beef, I completely agree. I think she was made for this role in this, and I think she does a really good job at playing your standard white woman in this role. She is all the standard, like all the beauty standards, all the voice is perfect. The voice is what standards are: high pitched, light, all sing-songy. So she does a really great job at all of that. There is definitely a deeper layer.
I want to jump in on the scene where they all arrive at school, because there's so much I feel like going on there, especially with regards to how the movie gets into the gradations of difference and sort of the celebration of difference or lack thereof, where a bunch of people arrive in the movie in that scene. Elphaba is one of them, but also Nessa, her sister, who, of course, Elphaba is green. Nessa doesn't have the use of her legs. She's in a wheelchair. We also get Bach from Munchkinland, who is short, I guess. But all of those details are played to this theme of difference and the way that they're received. And there are little moments for each one of those characters sort of not quite being allowed into the space. And then I freaked out about this because I thought it was so cool that they literally played a classic DEIB meme. Have you ever seen the one with that's like three people standing next to each other on each on a box looking over a fence, but they're different heights? And they did an applause scene where everybody jumps up and Elphaba is like, can't remember if Elphaba is at the head of the class or if she sort of gets missed in that moment. And then they cut to Nessa sitting in her chair. She can't see because everybody has stood up, and Bach has stood up, but he's too short to see over everybody's heads. And it's like, I've seen this meme all over the internet all the time. It's a classic sort of.
I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah.
That is brilliant, Eli. I did not even realize that.
There are so many political and social themes, but it really is a DEI movie in such a specific way, not just a social justice movie, but it really gets into these themes of celebrating difference and demonstrating this thing of being in the space, being in the school in this case, isn't the same thing as being accepted, as being supported, as being really given the tools that you need to thrive. And in a lot of cases, it makes people a target for additional barriers that nobody else has to face.
This scene, I don't want to move on from the scene too quickly either, because there's some stuff I want to point out as well. Again, to your point, Eli, this is a DEI movie in every way. And that detail I definitely didn't pick up on. And I'm so glad you pointed it out. One thing I love about it is that there aren't direct metaphors. So I think that there's a lot of ways that different communities and different types of people can see themselves or their struggles reflected in multiple characters at different times in the movie, because they do a good job of bringing some of those experiences to life in this like artificial reality. So, for example, the sibling dynamic reminds me so much of dynamics I've learned that siblings do have in families where there's issues of colorism, right? And like the darker sister versus the lighter sister and the way they're treated by the family, even the way the sisters treat each other. Because Nessa is pretty awful to Elphaba. She is awful to Alphaba. She is not a good sister, right? And I wanted to bring that up because that is so nuanced. Like, I don't know that everyone would pick up on that or see it in the same way or even count Nessa's actions towards Alphaba in any particular way because she's not a lead character necessarily. But I do think there's a lot there. I love the microaggression scene. And if you didn't know it was a microaggression scene, they try to make it extremely clear that it was a microaggression scene as they're ending it. And the guy's like, I don't see color. Like, and it keeps on walking. But that scene where she's just like microaggressing Elphaba over and over again, and Elphaba finally like reacts and bites back. And Ariana goes something, I was just trying to be nice. Like, what? Like, it's just being nice. Like, what did I do wrong? And she's like, how many times have we seen this play out? How many times have we been the person who's like, girl, like cut it out, so like bite back a little bit just for someone to clutch their pearls.
And then they double down. Same thing happens to Nessa.
And they double down.
Scene, and Alphaba finally snaps to shut it down, and that everything kind of collapses around her. Like she
That's right.
makes a mess, so to speak. She like makes a scene.
And even in that scene, what I love about that scene too is the way Elphaba advocates for her sister. Even despite it all, Elphaba's like, she's independent. She does not need your help. This is what she wants, and she is very capable. And Elphaba's the only person in the film that we see who respects her sister's autonomy and advocates for it, despite everything she's been through. Right. And then my last note, and this doesn't have to be about this scene, just in general, we're talking about the substance of the movie and the content of the movie in DEI world. But I also want to flag, even if we're not going to get into discussion here, there were real DEI issues even outside of this movie. There was a lot of backlash because Elphaba's Black. There was backlash against the young woman, the actress who was in the wheelchair, who's really in a wheelchair, and people were saying awful things about her. And how they want to push her off of a cliff and things like that. And it's just like, this is a real person. And so while we're talking about it in this like context of the movie, it's so interesting that like it's meta. Here's this movie for this thing, but it exists in this world that can be really hard and violent towards these issues.
I don't really think this is a stretch to say that the treatment of the animals can be related to so much in history. Because there has historically always been marginalized groups that have been preferred to be seen, not heard. But in today's context, it just reminds me of what's happening to immigrants in this country. That we are okay as a society. We're okay with them working in our kitchens. We're okay with them working manual labor jobs. But the second that they start requesting healthcare, that they start requesting some help, it's time to gather them up and take them out. So watching that, and especially that just the line, animals should be seen, not heard, for me, what it made me reflect on is how society treats immigrants. I think when we think about DEI movies as a society, we think about what's in your face. Like the movie Hidden Figures or any civil justice movie that's in your face. People are like, that's DEI. But then they think about Wicked and they're like, no, that's not DEI. It's like, yes, it is. And I've been saying this term a lot. It's the broccoli's hidden. We're hiding the broccoli. But if you just open your eyes a little bit, it's there. And if you watch that scene and you turn on the news today, you can pick up the correlation. These two scenes run parallel. Only one's in a fantasy world and the other one is happening in our own backyard.
Totally. I love Schneider broccoli, by the way. You were talking about that yesterday. It's definitely going in the lexicon for me. Broccoli is great. I think also Dilmond really sort of illustrates the extremity to which exclusion can go and how dehumanizing it is. Because I think with Elphaba especially, we're really getting all the kind of quiet parts, microaggressions. She's striving, she's struggling. Will she make it? And it's kind of easy to think that's something different than the outright discrimination that the animals and shoes are facing and being put in cages and being silenced. And I think the movie does a really good job of connecting those two experiences as being on the same continuum of exclusion.
I think throughout the movie, there were several instances that I felt uncomfortable. And because it was really trippy to see the things that were happening in the movie and how accurate they are in representation of real things. And one of the, like, I might be getting ahead, but two things that I wanted to say about Professor Dillman is when he's being taken away, how we're seeing that with professors in universities talking. That was really scary. And when they bring the little like lion cub in the cage, I'm sure I felt horrible for the lion. And I'm sure other people felt horrible. But we're not, well, not we, but there's people that are not feeling horrible for real people in the real world being in cages. So how do we feel empathy and feel bad for this fantasy world, but we are not able to like bring it to real life and understand like how horrible that is? And another thing that I actually just remember about Professor Dillman is when he was struggling to say Glinda's name and everyone was laughing. I think I felt super uncomfortable because y'all know English is not my first language, and sometimes I say my weird words that don't make sense. And it was sad. It was sad. So, well, I particularly don't like Glinda either, but the fact that she like adapted, I don't know if adapted is the right word, but like met him in the middle type of, for them to be able to have that connection and him saying her name and her like changing her name. I don't know. Maybe I'm just digressing, but yeah, those were my thoughts. I don't know if that made sense.
Wait, yeah, keep going. What you're talking about the relationship between Glinda and Professor Dillman?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know, because I think why I took it back is sort of like the notion that you shouldn't change your name for other people to pronounce it better. So for me, my name is in English ? Because my parents got it from like an English show, well, an American show, Step by Step. I don't know if y'all ever watched it. Dana
that show.
Foster. So that's
Oh my
where
god, I love that show.
Oh my god,
Yeah.
that's what I used to love that show.
So the side tangent, but that's where they got it from. So I particularly don't have that issue, but I know like my brother, he goes by our last name because no one really can say his name in English speakers, and it like makes me think about him losing a part of his identity. So that's where I'm conflicting on that, but I'm also thinking of how Professor Dillman might have felt that Glinda was able to like be nice to him in comparison to everyone else and understand that he just couldn't say her name. So I don't know if that.
I really like that reading. I definitely didn't experience that scene that way, and I wonder how much is intentional in this way of the movie having a lot of layers. It definitely gets played in this way of Glinda giving somebody with, I think what reads as like a speech impediment, a hard time. And it's very, I think what I'm realizing now is how much of that scene, the feeling of it comes from the crowd of onlookers, the sort of classroom full of students clutching their pearls, when actually, I guess when you break down the exchange of the dialogue between Glinda and Professor Dillman, they're both pretty straightforward about what they need and what they're able to do. Where she's like, no, that's not my name. My name is Galinda. Galinda, not Glinda. Please pronounce it correctly. He's like, okay. That's kind of his first, just like, okay, I hear you. And then he says a thing about goats not having upper front teeth, I think. It's like, I literally can't pronounce that, but I hear you. And like continues on with the lesson. But it's everybody around them being like, how could he? That like they just want to think the worst of him already because of implicit bias. That really plays out. I love that connection.
No, and like thinking if it would have been a different, like the other way around, would the people have reacted the same way? They would have been, well, I just can't say your name. And it's like there is a valid reason for him not to be able to say her name. So yeah, I don't know, many layers to think about, but that's something I wanted to bring up.
Oh, going back to like DEI movies, and I think there's this misconception that they're all new and that like this is a new thing that's just happening now. And so when you have a story like Wicked that is like decades old based on an even older story. Like, I'm sure there's a larger fan base than just people that are aligned with our views, right? There has to be. This was like the biggest movie ever. And I hope that it kind of maybe changed some hearts or softened them in the right direction, because like these aren't new ideas. Treating your peers with respect is not a new thing, and getting names right or having reasons for this or that is not a new thing. And so I was just kind of trying to watch it with that idea in mind of like, who else is watching this that was maybe discovering these things for the first time, if that makes sense.
This was, I mean, I wonder how much we'll get into it, but I can't get away from the fact that this was the #1 movie in America like 2 months after Donald Trump was elected again.
Exactly.
It's like, how does this make sense, right?
True. Make that make sense. I can't.
Right. And like, what's the newest, or Superman? That's apparently very DEI coded, we'll call it. And I'm hearing on TikTok, people are like, oh, like my very like MAGA adjacent family didn't want to go see it. They were afraid. And then they went and saw it and realized that it was the same message as always. And they loved it. It's like, yeah, it's the same message as always, because this is not a new idea. This is not a new message. So I'm hoping the more kind of like legacy media that comes out that's still saying the same things they've always said, I don't know, I'm hoping people will see that and realize it's not a new concept. And then I have the line written down here somewhere. Okay, when they're in Dr. Dillman's class and Glinda talks about she doesn't understand why he can't just teach them history instead of harping on the past. And I loved that so much.
I have that one written down too.
And I hope that the folks in the audience that think like that step on that and maybe realized how ridiculous that was.
You have such a great comeback to that, which I think it's, we can't escape the past and we ignore it at our own peril, because the past, I think, like basically shapes the present, or shapes our experience in the present, which also feels like a deeply DEI coded sort of counter argument to that. Like, why can't you just go along to get along? Can't, because actually we're standing at the tip of decades and centuries of history and people being treated in a certain way, and that's what we're responding to in this moment.
And I think, just to go back to my first point, how like these aren't new messages and these aren't new like themes, gave me something adjacent to hope, where like it's like, okay, these things have always been happening. And so like what's happening right now is horrific and terrifying. And I definitely lead with my like white lady approach of like, this has never happened before and it's terrible. But then you see things that were made or stories that were based in decades old and longer stories. And it's like history repeats itself, but we also make it out on the other side. So these stories keep being relevant, and they shouldn't be, but like we have an opportunity. We can learn from them. We can make it out on the other side. So maybe that's hope. It's like icky hope, but
Sounds like hope. I mean, true hope is difficult.
And we'll take it, right? At the end of it, we'll take whatever that is. We'll take it because it counts. Every ounce of it counts. I just wanted to round this bit out because I had a lot of similar impressions. And with that quote in particular, that quote hit hard for me in a few ways, because I think it was something like, she said, teach us history instead of telling us about the past. And even that play on words, like his story, history is his story. Who's the his here, right? Kind of an acknowledgement, whether it's conscious or not, that history isn't necessarily the truth, isn't necessarily what happened in the past, but it is the story we're supposed to be told, is the story we're supposed to follow. The other thing that stood out to me was even right before that quote and that scene, when he's explaining to the students why he's even going to do this, he says, look, this is highly discouraged right now. People don't want me talking about it, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's important. And it wasn't a big, like, boisterous, like, fist up in the air rebellion. It's a quiet rebellion that so many of us engage in every single day, right? And I feel like we do this. But the quote that Angie brought up that was written on the board, the animals should be seen and not heard. Again, another just like on the nose quote. I don't know if you guys know the original quote. The original quote is, children should be seen and not heard. And it is a huge issue of violence against children. that quote represents in everyday language. I'm so glad they did it, because I think there's still a lot of people who believe children should be seen and not heard, and don't see how that's violence and how it's abuse. And putting it in this context, I think, gives people an opportunity to consider that phrase again. Dana, I think you brought this up about watching the professors being pulled away, how that's being scary. When they're like in that scene where all the animals are kind of like convening and trying to share information, the professor says that a solicitor was disbarred just for arguing a case. And if you're not like listening, you could totally see that. But we're seeing there's attacks on freedom of speech. There's attacks on points of views that are different from the history, from his story. And so there's just so many connections to what we're seeing today and what we have seen historically happen with authoritarian regimes and folks that take over control of speech, of ideas, of thoughts. And it's scary. It's scary because it's so familiar, and we're seeing it now.
There's sort of a critical scene where they all go out together to the Ozdust ballroom. And this is another, I really want to break down the scene. I think it is.
We have to.
There's so much happening. There's so much happening underneath the surface. Elphaba has not been invited to the party, but she ends up there. And this is another moment in the movie, this whole scene, where a absolutely classic clinical textbook DEIB metaphor is played out. I don't know how many cut and dried DEI trainings I've been in where they talk about the party and getting invited to the party, and the way DEI and B reflect different ways of being at the party, getting invited to the party, getting invited to dance, and then like really feeling like you can dance like nobody's watching. And all those stages literally happen in this scene, which is pivotal also for Elphaba's stepping into her power, Glinda starting to have the veil removed, and taking the extremely uncomfortable first step into allyship with Elphaba, which I also think we'll get, like, I really want to unpack the scene, but she actually does it, I think, very carefully and compassionately in a way that she creates space without taking up all the space that she creates. And that's a really cool model, I think.
You nailed it. Nailed the setup. I will let others chime in on like the specifics of some of the other things. The one thing I will add is the way I ugly cried in theaters during this scene is embarrassing. Like, it was just like snot. Like, it was bad. I was crying so hard, and I knew it was coming. Like, I've seen the music, but for me, I think the emotional piece of it, to seeing that love and compassion come through, to see the person who, because before this moment, Galinda was awful to Elphaba. Like, and she went out of her way to make Elphaba's existence at Shiz hard. And for her to be the one to then wrap her in her arms and use her privilege, use her popularity as a shield. And albeit she's the one who caused all this chaos to begin with, right? Like, Elphaba in this position showed up at the party with this thing on because of her. And for her to own it and to be accountable for it. There's the part where she wipes the tear off of Elphaba's eye. Woo! I was a Tanya-shaped puddle on the floor. It's just, I love that scene, but I'll let others chime in.
I will say that was that one scene where Glinda said, like, no, this is hard for her. When she recognized that, I forgot about my beef for a hot second.
You forgot about your what?
My beef with her.
Oh, with Ariana. I got you.
She's giving Ariana the credit for that line too. She's like, fine.
The way she delivered it, he made me forget. And that's movie magic. You forget.
Before we get there, there's a point I think I want to make. Because because I think before she goes to Oz, things get worse, right? Around the animals, they have the lion cub, all this stuff. And there's a line where Elphaba starts thinking about like what could be done. And she's talking to the professor and she says, we have to tell the wizard. We have to tell the wizard. And that part hit me like a ton of bricks, even though I've seen it before. But it just reminded me of my own heartbreak when I realized that my government or certain institutions or the things that I was taught, my religious background, my nationality, whatever it is, these things that I held as part of my identity or that I trusted or that I thought And I remember thinking that there would be a way forward or justice would be served by you name it. And then knowing what happens later, you're like, oh, it's that story again.
Yeah.
She's gonna have the rug pulled from under her very soon. But I think that reaction is so natural to believe. Like I say it all the time. One of the reasons I wanted to be a lawyer, the reason why I do DEI is because I really did and do believe in the values I was taught that this country stood for, that my religion stood for, that my countries of origin stood for. And it's only later in life with a lot of discernment and study and support and community that I realized that not all of these things that we say we stand for do we actually stand for, not in action, at least. And if I want those things to be true to who I am, those are choices I have to make every day. I can't rely on some of these things, these myths I was sold as history to be the answer.
I think that line is important too for anybody who is dancing through life, right? For anybody who is brainless, so life is painless, because they are thinking the same thing, like, let's just go tell the wizard. And for them, they're like, just tell, you didn't commit that crime. Just like, show your proof. Show the proof that you didn't commit it. The judge will definitely take you out of jail. It doesn't matter that you are a Black man and that you didn't commit that crime. You have proof that you didn't commit it. So go tell the judge. You'll be fine. And for anybody who's living in that bubble, for anybody who's brainless, life is painless for them. And I think that one line invites anybody who has their blinders on because they are privileged, who went to go see a movie because Ariana Grande was in it. I think that invites them all to be in Elphaba's shoes. And just like Elphaba, they're also going to have the rug pulled out from under them.
I think a good example of what Angie was talking about was when the new history teacher, when they bring him in, and it's very much just like, this is the new way that we're going to, like, this is the new history. We're not going to talk about what you talked about before, forget all that. And then again, in the end, when Madame Marvel gets on her like loudspeaker and is like, oh, Elphaba's always been evil. And you know, how much we're seeing that today and how we've seen that in other historical context.
The only thing I really want to break down is the last one. She gets invited to go to Oz. We go to Oz. They're so excited. And then it turns out the wizard is the wizard. They're explaining the grimoire and the magic and the monkeys.
Turns out the wizard was Jeff Goldblum. That's a sticking point for me.
I love Jeff Goldblum.
Wait, you didn't notice the statue of his face in the beginning when she's singing The Wizard and I?
Nope. And then I heard the voice. And I was like,
she's like, the wizard's Jeff Goldblum. I'm like, oh, BB they.
I went in knowing nothing.
That is hilarious. No, I think so. This is another thing my kids picked up immediately, right? Like even before we see that he is the bad guy and that Madame Marvel's the bad guy or whatever, my kids picked up on that so early on.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that they did. Because my kids are, for context, my kids are only 4 and 6. So if a 4 and 6-year-old can read social cues and read between the lines, why do we think grown adults watching this movie could miss them completely?
Because they're painless. They're brainless. So life is painless. There's a whole song about it.
But I mean, we're having this conversation, right? Because we know that there are plenty of people who watched that movie and didn't take away any of what we're talking about. And so it's a challenge too, because this art form exists for this very reason. And so I think this conversation is an important one, even if it seems kind of silly to be talking about a musical. But I can't get away from the fact that so much of it that we are seeing play out on screen, we have seen play out on headlines and on our news feeds for months, for decades, forever. So it's interesting to see it in that way. But I think there are things that are in this last scene that are worth bringing up. I can't get over the scene where Elphaba is kind of forced to create the flying monkeys against her knowledge that this would harm them. And it was very manipulative and scary. And she is the bad guy for doing this very thing, but she was the victim. She was a victim in this herself, right? And I feel like that gets lost in the story in a big way because, I mean, not in this movie, it's revealing this, but when we see, if you watch The Wizard of Oz, if you're looking at that story, you have no idea how these things came to be. So putting this narrative that she was kind of tricked, she was duped, and she caused harm, and she felt shame, she felt guilt. She was not, I mean, this was the literal straw that broke the camel's back for her. Like, you made me do this? You took advantage of my power and you did this to me, to them? Like, that really, I think in the movie is the breaking point for her, where she was just like, oh, no. Even if this is what I want. And she says it in the song, like in Defying Gravity, when you're like, I hope you're happy. We're happy now. And she's like, I can't want this. Even if this is what I wanted my whole fucking life, like, I can't want this now. Now I know what it really is. And I'm just like, yes, that's what it's supposed to be.
This is where we're going to talk about the pipeline. This is the thing. I feel like this is the culmination of a theme. We sort of started to touch on it earlier, but it really gets unraveled over the course of the movie, where Elphaba is brilliant, but excluded. And her brilliance is what gets her the attention of the powers that be, and they give her a seat. And she has to jump through all their hoops, and it's super uncomfortable until she makes friends with the popular girl, which is a great watershed. And she starts to roll towards stepping into her power, but it's by learning to assimilate and learning the rules. Madame Morrible has this great line that she says like 3 or 4 times over the course of the movie. Again, not with like a bum, 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 but like it could use one where she's like, you can really make good.
Yeah.
And it's like, what does that mean? Like, is everybody else making good? What is
And like, why am
overregain that she
I?
needs to make good? What do you mean that just by being the best in the class, you could wash away some stain of your identity? And she does. She jumps through all the hoops, and she really gets into going to a wizard and being the wizard's pupil and fixing everything and being powerful. And then her breakthrough talent is exploited. And I think that is a big through line of this movie too, where the exploitation, and there's another good word you used earlier, Tanya, where she has this thing, she's sort of manipulated. You can't, even if you jump through all the hoops, even if you get to that promised place of excellence, you can't really be a part of things, and you're really just destined to be manipulated and exploited until you, as she does eventually in the climactic final scene, say, fuck all of it. I'm just going to do me. And I don't need any of you to be powerful and to be great and to be excellent. I'm going to go change the world on my own.
Well, right from the very beginning, that's what was bugging me, was like the idea that, oh, you are going to be this powerful person. You are going to do this because we see whatever in you, so you are going to do it. And there was never a chance for Elphaba to like decide if she even wanted to. Like, yeah, she might be the most powerful magical witch in the whole world, but if she doesn't want to use her power, like maybe she wants to use it to, like, I don't know, cook a really good meal. Like, it's her power. She should be able to use it how she wants. But right from the very beginning, it's been, let's funnel you into this one area and make you think that it's for your own good. The final thought I'd written down was Oz's power lays in exploitation and oppression. And that was my final line.
This kind of like, and again, like, is it a stretch? I don't know. But it really makes me think about the NFL and how the overarching, what the story's about is essentially we are taking Elphaba and we're exploiting her powers. Like at the end of part 1, her powers are exploited, and they basically use her for her talents, which makes me think about the NFL, because we use these men, predominantly Black men, for their talents. But then when they tell you there is injustice being served, if they take a knee, NFL doesn't help you out. They like you when you are using your talents for their ticket sales.
When you're seen in that herd.
For their merchandise. Exactly. They want these NFL players seen and not heard. We want to see your talents, but we don't want to hear about your injustice. So yeah.
We don't even have to go to a different industry. We can talk about Big Law. Elphaba's story
that's everywhere.
is my story. Right?
That's
like
everywhere.
I fought so hard to do all the things to only feel like I was in the middle of in the belly of the beast. And I had lost all the reasons why I wanted to do all of this in the first place. And that's why the story will always like ring so true to me. Her example of like the way she's viewed, especially by those in power, the pet to threat phenomenon that we see happen with Black women and women of color everywhere. Like it's so like they just do such a good job of putting it out there. And the other piece of it that we didn't talk about earlier is how much of this hate, of the oppression, of the microaggressions, of the story they've been told, she had internalized. Right from the very beginning.
She's a little girl.
Yeah, when she's a child, you see how much she's internalized. The scene when she's having her bestie moment with Ariana and she's like, it's my fault. And Ariana's like, look, a lot of shit has happened, but this is not your fault. But those are the kinds of things that we carry in a society where we're always told we're not enough, that we're ugly, that we're this, that our hair is bad, that we're not smart enough, that we never speak English the right way, that we internalize it. We do. And so there's so much richness in the story.
I think it is important to talk about movies, and in particular this movie, because it was such, I mean, if you didn't watch this movie, you're Mary Ellen. No, if you didn't watch this movie, you are an oddity, because so many people watch this movie. So it's important that we talk about this in particular. There has never been a great movie that wasn't, that the subliminal theme is oppression. You cannot name one movie, one story that is amazing and oppression isn't the theme.
Wait, you're saying that movies that are good are all about oppression?
Yeah.
I think a lot of them are. I think that's true. The other piece of this that we haven't discussed is the other side of the coin, right? Because Alphabet is showing us people who fight against that oppression very like actively, who are taking their lemons and making lemonade in their own way. But Galinda also represents something too in this. And how easily she's just like, let's play the game. Just say sorry. They'll let you do this. Come on. This was always the plan. Don't stray from the plan.
I hope people are listening to this just before the second part comes out. I think that's what
I hope too.
Because I totally agree with you, Tanya. I think that's a major thing that's being set up for the next movie, is the sort of give and take between wanting to change things from inside the system and wanting to change things from outside the system, and all the things that Glinda eventually has to give up more and more to keep her still privileged position inside the system, even though she's trying to do the right thing. I don't really know how to wrap this up. I feel like it's time for a wrap.
Same. I think we should all try to sing that like war cry. We've ever seen those like TikToks where they have a family trying to make like everyone has to take a turn singing a certain line or making a certain, like it's usually something very awkward.
Yeah.
Like from Valor, and everyone has to try to do it without laughing.
I love that idea. Tanya, I was saying maybe just before you came on that I think we should all do as a promo, do the Glinda hair flip.
I took my hair loose. I'm Alphabet right now, as you can see, so I can't really do it.
We should just end it with Keke Palmer doing the riff.
Wait, what riff did Keke Palmer do?
She like accepted an award, and she like pointed to Cynthia, and she's just like, I can't believe you didn't win, because, and then she like does the riff.
Stop.
It's hilarious.
That's hilarious.
I love Keke.
And amazing. Well, this is our first attempt at a Deep for the People season 2, right? And we didn't even mention that, but our whole plan here was, even the first time around with Deep for the People, was to kind of just make people aware and consider that you don't have to read textbooks and go to conferences always to be considering these themes. They exist everywhere. And even in popular culture, there's fun ways to consume this and make sure that you're thinking about these issues in a productive way, right? Like when we first started doing this, it was all kinds of media, not just movies. We talked about Instagram accounts, books, articles, and taking control of your algorithms. And so this is very much in line with our ideals and values, and it's fun to talk about. And so let's keep doing this. Let's keep finding new and different ways to bring these principles to life for folks.
Yeah, DEI is everywhere you look, if you know how to look for it.
Well, and the more you like practice it, the easier it is to see it.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Building Belonging. Opinions expressed are those of the speakers and not necessarily of the City Bar. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe wherever you listen. This podcast was produced and edited by Eli Cohen and Dana Ray Tovar.